Walk down any alley behind a Phoenix gas station in July, and the asphalt reads 140 degrees. The air burns going into your lungs. Birds drop dead from the sky. But behind a dumpster, under a stretched piece of blue tarp, a 68-year-old Vietnam veteran named Ray is sitting in what he calls his shade box. And the air inside that little structure is 22 degrees cooler than the alley around him. He learned how to build it in 1968 in the jungle outside Da Nang. The army taught him things they don't teach civilians: how to read wind, how to find water in a place that wants you dead, how to make a piece of fabric and 3 sticks keep you alive when the temperature climbs past anything a human body should survive. Today, on any given night in America, more than 35,000 veterans are sleeping outside, under bridges in Houston, in encampments along the Los Angeles River, in wooded patches behind shopping plazas in Tampa and Charlotte and Detroit. And the tricks they use to keep their shelters cool in summer and warm in winter aren't tricks at all. They're the same field skills that kept them alive in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. This is what they don't put in the news segments about the homeless veteran crisis. The men and women living in tents and tarp structures aren't just surviving. They're applying decades of military training to the strangest battlefield they ever fought on: American sidewalks. Here's how they do it. The first thing Ray taught a younger veteran named Marcus when Marcus arrived at the encampment was the gap. Marcus had pitched a single tarp directly over his sleeping bag, pulled tight, staked at the corners, standard camping setup, the way they teach you at scout camp. Ray watched him do it. Then he asked Marcus to lie under it for 10 minutes in the Arizona afternoon. Marcus came out soaked through with sweat. He said it felt like an oven because it was an oven. A single tarp pulled tight against the air above it absorbs the sun and radiates that heat downward straight onto whatever is underneath. The plastic itself becomes the heat source. So Ray showed him the double layer technique. 2 tarps, one above the other, with a 6 to 10 inch gap of air between them. The top tarp catches the sun. The bottom tarp stays cool. And the air gap between them does the actual work, because moving air carries heat away faster than still air. It's the same principle that makes a thermos work. The same reason double pane windows beat single panes. The Army calls this the dead air principle. Marines call it the gap. Veterans living in the desert call it the difference between sleeping and dying. In Phoenix encampments along the dry riverbeds, you can spot the veteran shelters from a quarter-mile away. They're the ones with 2 tarps stacked. Civilian campers use one. Veterans never make that mistake twice. Now, keeping the air cool inside the shelter is the next problem. And this is where it gets ingenious. In a homeless encampment in East Los Angeles, a Marine Corps veteran named Daniel built what he calls his Iraq cooler. It is a 5-gallon plastic bucket, the kind you can pull from behind any hardware store in America. He cut a hole in the lid for a small battery-powered fan, the kind that costs $8 at a dollar store. Inside the bucket, he packed wet rags around the perimeter, soaked from a public bathroom sink. The fan blows air through the wet fabric, and as the water evaporates, it strips heat out of the air. The temperature coming out of that bucket runs 15 to 20 degrees cooler than the air going in. He learned the principle in Iraq, where the troops rigged similar evaporative coolers in their bunks using whatever they could scavenge from the supply chain. It is called a swamp cooler in civilian terminology, and it has been used in the American Southwest for 100 years. But here is the part that hits different. The young Marine who pulled a tour in Fallujah is now using the same survival rigging in the alley behind a Trader Joe's. Same skills, different way are. There are versions of this swamp cooler in encampments across Las Vegas, Reno, Albuquerque, and Bakersfield. Veterans teach each other. New arrivals get walked through the build within the first week. By the second week, they are showing somebody else. And when summer ends, the real challenge begins, because heat will hurt you slowly. Cold will kill you in a single night. In Minneapolis last January, the temperature dropped to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind chill was worse. Hospitals were treating frostbite cases that came in through the emergency room doors looking like they had been through a chemical burn. And yet, in a small wooded patch behind a strip mall in suburban St. Paul, a 71-year-old Korean War veteran named Walter slept through that night in a structure he had built from materials anyone would have thrown away. His shelter was a layered cocoon. The outside was a cheap blue tarp tied between two trees. Inside the tarp, he had stacked sheets of cardboard, big flattened boxes from behind an electronics store. Inside the cardboard, he had a layer of crumpled newspaper. And inside the newspaper, he had a Mylar emergency blanket, the kind you can buy in a sporting goods store for $2. Then his sleeping bag. Then his body. That arrangement traps 4 separate air pockets. Each pocket is heated by his body and held in place by the layer around it. By morning, the air immediately around Walter's body was 45 degrees warmer than the air outside the tarp. The military taught him this in Korea in 1952. He was 19 years old, sleeping in a foxhole near the Yalu River, and a sergeant who had survived the Battle of the Bulge in World War II showed him how to layer his gear. The principle is simple, but Walter said something that stopped me cold when I heard it. He said cardboard is the most valuable thing in a winter camp. More valuable than food, more valuable than money. If you have cardboard, you live. In every major American city with a homeless veteran population, cardboard moves through encampments like a tradable commodity. The good stuff, thick double-walled boxes from appliance deliveries, gets passed to whoever needs it most. New guys, older guys, the ones who did not make it through last winter unscathed. This is not poverty as a state of mind. This is wartime triage applied to civilian life. And then there's the question of fire. Open flame in a homeless camp draws 3 problems. Police attention, which leads to encampments being shut down. Other camp residents, some of whom mean harm. And carbon monoxide poisoning inside enclosed shelters, which kills people every single winter. The veterans solved this with something called a Dakota fire hole. It's a technique that dates back to the indigenous tribes of the Northern Plains, picked up by the Army in the 1800s and taught in military survival schools ever since. You dig a hole roughly 1 foot wide and 1 foot deep. Then you dig a second hole next to it, angled to connect with the first at the bottom. The first hole is your fire chamber. The second hole feeds it oxygen. The result is a fire that burns hotter than a regular campfire with less fuel, produces no visible smoke, and stays mostly hidden below ground level. In wooded encampments outside Atlanta and Portland and Spokane, veterans dig these holes in the soft earth and use them to boil water, cook scavenged food, and warm their hands. The hole can be covered with a flat rock when it's not in use. It leaves almost no trace. A Special Forces veteran in Oregon who spoke to a local news crew last winter described it like this: I dug Dakota holes in 3 different countries before I dug them in my own. You should sit with that sentence for a moment. But the most important survival skill, the one every veteran in every encampment knows, has nothing to do with materials or fire or rigging. It's about which direction your shelter faces. In basic training, every American service member learns the same lesson about field shelter orientation. Your entrance should face east, away from the prevailing winds and away from the afternoon sun. A west-facing entrance is a death sentence in 2 seasons. In summer, the afternoon sun pours directly into a west-facing shelter for 4 to 6 hours a day. The heat builds inside like a parked car. You cannot cool that space down with any amount of evaporative cooling or shade tarping. The geometry has already lost the fight. In winter, west-facing shelters take the worst of the wind. In most of the United States, winter storms move west to east. A west-facing opening funnels freezing air directly onto your body for the entire night. So how do you figure out which way is east without a compass? The veterans use a trick from the field manuals. Take an analog watch. Point the hour hand at the sun. The midpoint between the hour hand and the 12 mark in the northern hemisphere points south. From there, east is to the left, west is to the right. If you don't have an analog watch, you find moss on the north side of trees. You watch where the sun rises and sets. You ask another veteran. In the Phoenix encampment where Ray lives, you can walk from one shelter to the next and notice that almost every entrance faces the same direction, east, slightly northeast. It's not coordinated. It's just that everyone in that camp has been taught the same lesson by the same kind of teachers. There's one more technique that gets used in the worst weather. It's called the crawl space. When the temperature drops below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, no amount of insulation in a tent will keep a person warm if there's empty air around them. Body heat needs to be contained in a small space to do its job. The veterans solve this by building what amounts to a coffin inside their shelter. They take whatever they have, sleeping bags, blankets, jackets, and arrange them into a tube just barely large enough for their body. They crawl into it feet first, pulling the opening closed behind them. The space around their body is small enough that it warms up to 90 degrees within 20 minutes. Their head sticks out into the colder shelter, but the rest of them is in what feels like a sauna. This technique came out of mountain warfare training. American troops in the Korean mountains, in the Hindu Kush, in the high desert of Afghanistan, all learned to make themselves smaller against the cold. The veterans living outside today haven't forgotten any of it. Now, you might be wondering why I'm telling you all of this, why these survival techniques matter. Here's the truth. Last year, more than 40,000 American veterans were homeless on any given night. Tens of thousands more cycled in and out of homelessness over the course of the year. The Department of Veterans Affairs counts 13,000 who are unsheltered, sleeping outside in tarps and tents and Dakota fire holes. These are men and women who enlisted, who deployed, who came home with injuries you can see and injuries you can't. Some of them have been waiting on disability claims for 3 or 4 years. Some of them have traumatic brain injuries that make it impossible to hold down a steady apartment. Some of them have addiction issues that grew out of the painkillers they were prescribed for combat wounds. And the country they served has not, by any measure that matters, taken care of them. So they're applying their training to American sidewalks. They're using techniques from Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan to survive Phoenix summers and Minneapolis winters. The same skills that kept them alive in war are now keeping them alive in peace. The tricks aren't really secret. Every one of these techniques is in a U.S. Army field manual. You can find them in any military survival school curriculum. The Boy Scouts teach versions of some of them. Mountaineers teach others. What makes them feel secret is who's using them and where. A Dakota fire hole behind a Walmart in Spokane doesn't look like military training. A 5-gallon swamp cooler in an alley in Los Angeles doesn't look like it came out of Iraq. A cardboard cocoon in a Minnesota tree line doesn't look like Korea in 1952, but it is. All of it is. The veterans I researched for this video are sharing these techniques with civilians who end up on the streets too. Younger people who never served are learning the GAP principle and the swamp cooler build from 65-year-old men who picked it up in jungle warfare. The military training is becoming a kind of survival inheritance, passed down on concrete instead of in barracks. A volunteer outreach worker in Salt Lake City told a reporter last year that you can almost always tell a veteran encampment from a civilian one. The veteran camps are neater, the shelters are angled correctly, the fires are hidden, the water is stored carefully, the cardboard is organized. She said it looks like a forward operating base, because that's what the people living there know how to build. There's a story that came out of a Houston encampment 2 years ago that has stayed with me. A flash flood hit the area in the middle of the night. Water rose 6 feet in less than an hour. Multiple homeless people drowned. But in one section of the encampment, where a group of veterans had built their shelters together, every single person survived. They had positioned their structures on higher ground. They had a buddy system. They had run-out routes mapped. When the water came, they grabbed their packs and moved together, following the kind of evacuation drill they practiced in basic training 30 and 40 years ago. The fire department captain who responded told a local reporter that the veterans section looked like a planned evacuation. He said that those men saved each other the way they were trained to save each other a long time ago. The skills don't leave you, even when everything else does. So the next time you walk past a tarp shelter behind a strip mall, or an encampment under a freeway overpass, or a man in a faded field jacket sitting outside a gas station in summer heat, understand what you might be looking at. You might be looking at a Vietnam medic, a Gulf War mechanic, an Afghanistan infantryman, a Cold War radar operator who spent 30 years staring at a screen in Alaska, and the small structure they built with their own hands from materials you would have thrown away is the application of everything their country taught them, redirected toward the only mission they have left: stay alive one more night, help the man next to them do the same. It's not really a secret trick, it never was. It's a quiet form of service that didn't end when the uniform came off. If this video meant something to you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. There's a generation of Americans walking past these men and women every day without understanding what they're seeing. That changes one viewer at a time. And to the veterans watching, the ones who served, the ones still sleeping outside tonight, the ones who taught these tricks, and the ones who learned them, thank you for what you did then, for what you are doing now, for all of it. We see you, and we are not going to stop talking about this.